A very good evening to all meditators. This evening, the topic of discussion is Four Noble Truths. It's because the practice of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, is based on the teachings of the Four Noble Truths. It is also known as Chatusatya Kammatthana, the meditational practice on Four Noble Truths. In other words, the practice that can lead the yogis to attain a path knowledge and realize the Four Noble Truths. So I believe all of you know what are the Four Noble Truths. And the first is the Noble Truth of suffering, Dukkha Satya. The second is the Noble Truth of the cause or the origin of suffering, or Samudaya Satya. And the third, the Noble Truth of the cessation of suffering, Nirodha Satya. And the fourth, the Noble Truth of the way or the path leading to the cessation of suffering, Magga Satya. So, if anyone wishes to know about the teachings of the Buddha, then one must study the teachings of the Four Noble Truths. One must gain right understanding by studying it. But the most important, one must practice in order to realize the truth. One can only realize the truth through personal experience or direct experience. So one has to practice. One has to develop the path. So in the scriptures, say that the first noble truth is the Dharma that should be fully understood. The second noble truth is the Dharma that should be fully abandoned. And the third noble truth is the Dharma that should be fully realized. And the fourth noble truth is the Dharma that should be fully developed. So, when one has fully developed the path, then one will be able to fully understand the truth of suffering. When the truth of suffering has been fully understood, then one could, then the cause suffering will be abandoned. So when the cause of suffering has been abandoned, then one would fully realize the truth of the cessation of suffering. So in other words, in order to attain the cessation of suffering, one must abandon the cause of suffering. In order to abandon the cause of suffering, one must have been fully understood the truth of suffering. if one has not yet fully understood the truth of suffering, one will not make an effort to overcome or to abandon the cause, the original suffering. So you may have understood that birth is suffering, birth is suffering, old age is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow is suffering, lamentation, or pain, grief, distress. All these are suffering. Association with the unloved is suffering. Separations from the loved is suffering. Not to get what one wants is also suffering. It's not difficult to understand this suffering. But at the end, the Buddha said, in brief, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. So we have to understand that the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. But it's not easy to understand 5 aggregates are suffering unless one meditates, or in those one develops wisdoms or insight knowledge through the practice of satipatthana meditation or mindfulness meditation. So it's not possible to understand that 5 aggregates are suffering by reading the book or by hearing from others. It's also not possible to understand 5 aggregates are suffering by thinking or by any kinds of philosophical thinking and so on. So as long as one has not yet fully understood 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering, one would not make an effort to abandon the cause, the origin of suffering. So how are you going to fully understand 5 aggregates are suffering? So you have to develop the path, the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So in other words, you have to develop the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Truth of the path or the way leading to the cessation of suffering is the Noble Eightfold Path. It's usually known as the middle path, middle way. So when you are practicing mindfulness meditation, you are in fact developing the Noble Eightfold Path. Without practicing mindfulness meditation, it's not possible to develop the path fully. So, as you know, one of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path is right mindfulness. Right mindfulness refers to the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Mindfulness of body phenomena, mindfulness of feeling or sensation, mindfulness of consciousness, and mindfulness of Dharma. So when you practice mindfulness meditation, you have developed these factors right mindfulness. When you develop these factors of right mindfulness, other factors also be arising eventually with these factors of right mindfulness. So this evening, I shall explain the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. So, this evening, I shall explain the first noble truth, or the truth of suffering. In brief, suffering consists of three kinds. The first is known as the dukkha, or intrinsic suffering. It's not difficult to understand intrinsic suffering. For example, physical pain is suffering, or sickness is suffering, mental grief, sorrow are suffering, and so on. Everyone in this world is experiencing dukkha now and then. Then the second type of suffering is known as viparinama dukkha, suffering due to change. So this viparinama dukkha refers to happiness, present feeling. Happiness, present feeling are not permanent, are not everlasting. So happiness, suffering, happiness subject to change. It does not last forever. So that's why it is unsatisfactory. Even meditators may experience viparinama dukkha during the practice. For example, meditators are able to mindful and note constantly, continuously from one phenomenon to next phenomenon, from one moment to next moment. There's not much interruptions in the continuity of mindfulness. When the mind is free from mental hindrances and defilements, then the mind becomes calm, peaceful. So sometimes meditators are very happy with that state of mind, contented with it. But sometimes the mindfulness is disturbed or distracted by noise, sound, and the meditators fail to mindful and note the hearing. So when meditators fail to note the hearing, then that sound or noise causes disruptions to the mindfulness. So when there's no continuous mindfulness, the calmness, peacefulness also disappear. So meditators some meditators will feel angry about it because the calmness, peacefulness of the mind has been disturbed or destroyed by the noise, by the sound. So anger cause suffering to arise. Similarly, samatha meditators also could enjoy a calmness, peacefulness mind when they are able to concentrate the mind on one object for a period of time. So when the concentration is getting deeper and deeper, then they would experience calmness, peacefulness. But that calmness, peacefulness does not last long. When meditators are no longer concentrate the mind on the object, then calmness, peacefulness will disappear gradually. Or sometimes when concentration meditators are enjoying calmness, peacefulness, then that calmness, peacefulness are disturbed by noise, sound, then the calmness disappear. Then samatha meditators would feel very angry about it because the calmness disappear due to the noise, the sound. So when sometimes mindfulness meditators disturbed by the restlessness of the mind, they may have attained certain degree of calmness, peacefulness. Then sometimes the mind becomes restless. So mindfulness meditators will put forth a lot of effort to get rid of that restlessness. So sometimes meditators put a lot of effort, yet could not gain any calmness, peacefulness. Then they would feel frustrations, disappointment, and so on. So in that way, meditators do experience viparinama dukkha during the practice, when they try to gain back the calmness, peacefulness, but when they are not able to achieve it, then the feeling of frustration, disappointments will be arising. So if mindfulness meditators have the right attitude, if there's thinking, then mindfulness meditators will be mindful and note it as it duly occurs. Sometimes there be a train of thoughts arising, a process of thoughts arising, passing away, and very soon there be another thought process arising. If mindfulness meditators have the right attitude, then they just be mindful and note it as it duly occurs. If they could mindful and note it as it duly occurs, very soon thought processes become less and less. Then the mindfulness and concentration are getting better again. So this is viparinama dukkha, suffering due to change. But it's also not difficult to understand viparinama dukkha. What the meditators have to fully understand through personal experience or direct experience is known as sankhara dukkha. So this sankhara dukkha is translated as suffering due to formations. It's defined in the scriptures as the nature of being constantly oppressed by the instant arising and passing away of conditioned phenomena. So it's not possible to realize sankhara dukkha without meditations, without the practice of mindfulness meditation, vipassana meditation. So if mindfulness meditators aspire to realize sankhara dukkha, then they have to attain deep concentration. In other words, momentary concentrations. Only when meditators could attain momentary concentration, then they would realize sankhara dukkha, suffering due to formations. So if meditators aspire to attain momentary concentrations, then they have to make an effort to develop mindfulness constantly, continuously. In other words, mindfulness meditators have to put forth effort to develop mindfulness from one moment to next moment, from one object to next object, or from one process of movements to the following process of movements. So in other words, meditators have to develop constant and continuous mindfulness. Constant and continuous mindfulness is one of the important factors to make progress. And the other important factors to make progress is mindfulness of mental states, such as thinking, wandering mind, or sleepiness, drowsiness, sluggishness of the mind, and so on. So if meditators are able to mindful and note every mental state that's arising, especially during sitting meditation and walking meditation, then they can expect progress. And the other important factors is to develop constant and continuous mindfulness. So the mindfulness of routine activities or daily activities during the retreats is very important. If mindfulness meditators did not put forth effort in the mindfulness of daily activities, then they could not make much progress. So meditators have to put forth effort to develop constant and continuous mindfulness. But sometimes for practical reasons, meditators may not be able to mindful of every process of movements in details. For example, when meditators taking shower or washing the face in the morning, they may not able to do it slowly they may do it normally as usual. It's because the washroom is shared with other meditators, so they have to learn to be considerate. So they may not have to do it very slow, but they do it normally. Yet they have to mindful as well. So they may train themselves to mindful of the actions in general. In other words, to develop general mindfulness or general awareness. But at other places, other times, meditators may have to develop mindfulness in details. One of the good examples is paying homage to the Buddha. For example, when meditators are mindful of the process of bowing down, they may mindful and note the process of bowing down 3 or 4 times at the beginning of the retreat. But it's not enough to note that process of bowing down 3 or 4 times. They have to increase the mental noting gradually so that they could mindful of that process of bowing down in more and more details. In other words, that process of bowing down is not a single process. It's not a single process. It's a process consists of many series of bowing down movements. So it's not easy to even to realize impermanence. You may understand that impermanence as arising and passing away, or appearing and disappearing. But that understanding is not yet thorough. It's not complete. So even to understand or to realize impermanence, meditators have to attain deep concentration. Mindfulness must be very sharp. So we usually think that impermanence means appearing, disappearing, arising, passing away. But you have to realize more than that. We cannot see impermanence because of the notions of continuity. It explains the commentary. It's not easy to realize impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactories, and anatta. It's because these characteristics are concealed by, for example, continuity. So the commentaries, Visuddhimagga explained that impermanence is concealed by continuity. These notions of continuity exist because one could not realize the instant arising and passing away of every conditioned phenomenon. For example, sometimes meditators are mindful of the movements of rising and falling of the abdomen. If the mindfulness is not sharp and concentration is not deep, meditators may think that the rising movements and the falling movements is a continuing process. Both processes are connected to each other, are connected or joined together as a one single process. But if the mindfulness is sharp with some deep concentration, meditators may realize rising movements is one process, falling movements is another process. So we come back to the other examples, the process of bowing down. So one may think bowing down is a continuous process from the beginning of bending down until the forehead touching the floor. So one may think this is a continuous process. Even though one can mindful and note right at the beginning, right at the moment of process of bowing down, at the moment of beginning to the middle until the forehead touching the floor. So one could see the beginning of the process to the middle of the process till the ending of that process. So one may think one has seen the impermanence, but that realization is not yet thorough. A process does not last that long. If one aspires to realize Sankhara Dukkha, then one has to realize moment-to-moment impermanence. Moment-to-moment impermanence. So, in order to realize moment-to-moment impermanence, mindfulness meditators have to train the mind in order to mindful and note from one moment to next moment, and so on. So we always give instructions to mindfulness meditators to increase the effort gradually. Meditators have to increase the effort gradually so that the mental effort does not cause much tensions or pressures to the practice. So at the beginning of retreats, meditators could have mindful and note the process bowing down 3 or 4 times. Then on the second day or third day, when they are mindful of that process again, they should do it slower and make an effort to note 5 or 6 times. Then on the 4th day, when they mindful of the process bowing down, they do it slower than the 3rd day, so that they could mindful and note the process of bowing down 5 or 6 times or 7 times and so on. So meditators have to make use of the mental noting in order to sharpen the mindfulness. Mental noting is not yet meditating, but noting or labeling is very much helpful to develop the mindfulness. So that the mindfulness is getting more attentive, precise on the object or on the movements that was noted at the time. If there's no noting or labeling, the mindfulness or the attention of mind may not be attentive, precise. But we also emphasize that meditators have to make use of the mental noting wisely. Sometimes meditators are mindful and note the movements of foot. For example, lifting, pushing, dropping, lifting, pushing, dropping. But sometimes the noting is not precise. It seems the mindfulness is being distracted by the noting. Then meditators can drop the mental noting temporarily, but be mindful of the movements of lifting, pushing, dropping without any mental noting. And then when meditators are able to perceive the movements clearly, then it's better to pick up the mental noting again. So as long as meditators have not yet attained very deep concentration and good experience in mindfulness meditations, meditators may have to make noting quite frequently. So mental noting is very helpful. So when meditators could increase the mental noting gradually. So take the examples of the process of bowing down. So they bow down slowly, naturally. They should not purposely stop the movements. They should not note bowing, then they stop the movements or pause for a brief moment, then note bowing, move again, pause for a brief moment. So this way of doing it is not natural. So meditators should bow down slowly, naturally, but they increase the mental noting gradually, day by day. So when meditators are able to note it precisely, and the mindfulness or attention of mind is on the movements well, in other words, could perceive the process of bowing down well, eventually they may realize that that process of bowing down is not a single process. At first, they may realize as if there are 3-4 stages of bowing down. One process of bowing down after another process bowing down. If the mindfulness getting sharper, they would realize more and more processes of bowing down. And each process of bowing down is not connected to the next process. In other words, between this process of bowing down and next process bowing down, meditators experience as a disconnected. So, in other words, when one looks with the eyes, the process of bowing down is a single process, bending down very slowly, naturally. But to the meditators, my facilitators who have sharp mindfulness and deep concentration, then the meditators would experience a series of process of bowing down, one process of bowing down after another. So in that way, meditators could realize impermanence clearly. Similarly, when meditators are mindful of other process of movements, especially when they are practicing mindfulness of daily activities, they also need to develop mindfulness in more details whenever it's possible, wherever possible. If meditators did not take much interest in the practice of mindfulness daily activities, then their mindfulness will not be sharpened. If they only practice general mindfulness while doing their daily activities, then that general mindfulness is not good enough to strengthen the power of mindfulness. So in other words, mindfulness in more details while practicing daily activities, mindfulness of daily activities is very important. Similarly, when meditators practice walking meditation, they also have to train the mindfulness in order to note the movements in more details. They have to increase the noting gradually. Whenever they want to increase the noting, they may have to walk a little bit slower. So when they're able to walk a little bit slower, they may note the process of lifting more than once, or process of pushing more than once, and so on. So meditators need to develop constant mindfulness. In this, develop mindfulness from one moment to next moment. So only when meditators could develop mindfulness from one moment to next moment, eventually the mind is able to concentrate on one object from one moment to next moment, or in words, there's moment to moment concentrations. So when there's moment to moment concentration, then gradually the moment to moment experience becomes clearer and clearer. So if meditators aspire to realize Sankhara Dukkha, then they have to develop moment to moment mindfulness. It's because suffering, dukkha, the scriptures define that what is impermanence is dukkha. So if meditators could not realize impermanence clearly, then they could not realize dukkha clearly. So what we meant here, dukkha, is not dukkha. For example, during sitting meditation, some meditators may experience strong pains on the legs or strong numbness. They may think this is dukkha, but this is not yet realizations of Sankhara Dukkha. Meditators are only experiencing dukkha. Although in the commentaries explain that one could not see suffering or dukkha because is concealed by the postures. One could not see dukkha because dukkha is concealed by postures. So what's the meaning? It's because if meditators change your postures, whenever there's a feeling of pain or any kinds of physical discomfort, so when they change your postures, they just remove the pain or the physical discomforts of the old postures. Then they change your postures, there's no more pain or physical discomfort. But the pain may be arising again sooner or later. Then if meditators change your posture again, then the next new postures just remove or replace the pain, the physical discomforts of the previous postures. So the commentaries say that one could not realize dukkha because it's been concealed by the postures. But in the practice of Vipassana meditation, meditators have to realize impermanence, moment-to-moment impermanence, in order to realize dukkha. It's because dukkha, as defined in the scriptures as what's impermanent, is dukkha. Then the definition of impermanent is more than that. Earlier, I explained that most of us understand impermanence as appearing, disappearing, arising and passing away, or there's beginning, there's ending, and so on. But for Vipassana meditators, they have to realize more than that through their personal experience. So what is impermanent? Sometimes the commentaries say non-existence then come to be. Then it would cease or disappear completely. Non-existence, then it comes to be. So, in other words, before, when one object, when one object is arising at that moment, for example, a painful sensation is arising at that present moment. Do you think this pain, this object, has been existing somewhere before it appears? Do you think the object has been existing somewhere, then suddenly it appears? And sometimes we may have the understanding when the pain has disappeared, then later on the pain comes back again. You may think the same pain comes back again, and so on. So do you think when an object has disappeared, do you think that object will arise again later? Or when this object is arising, prior to but prior to its arising, this object has been existed somewhere or being stored in somewhere. But actually, in the commentary, explain that in Pali, ahutva sambonti, hutva pativentiti. Ahutva means it never appeared in the past. Sambonti means due to suitable conditions, then it appears. If there's no condition, then that the object will not can never appear. So, in other words, this object never appeared in the past, but when there's a suitable condition, it appears. Then, pativentiti, after appearing, it will cease. Cease means does not exist anymore. But in our normal life, sometimes we say something has disappeared, then it may come back again. But this is not anicca. If one understands the teaching of the Dharma, one may realize it's not easy to realize anicca. So, impermanence is not a simple understanding of arising and passing away, or appearing and disappearing. The object never appeared in the past, but there's condition, then it will appear. After appearing, it will cease. Cease means disappear and does not exist anymore. That means when the object had disappeared, you cannot say this object will appear again in the future. So, in order to realize impermanence, one has to be mindful. One has to experience the nature of impermanence again and again. So, there's no anicca nupassana. That means one has to realize impermanence again and again. So, take for example, when there's a sound or noise appear at the ear door, then what will arising to perceive the sound or the noise? The consciousness will be arising. So this consciousness is known as hearing consciousness or ear consciousness. So before the sound appear, where is this hearing consciousness? Actually, this hearing consciousness is never appear in the past. But because there's a conditions, the sound appear at the ear door, and the ear is endowed with sensitivity, then the consciousness, hearing consciousness will be arising. Then, as you know, consciousness is arising and passing away very rapidly. So when this hearing consciousness has disappeared, in other words, it does not exist anymore. Then, when there's another condition arising, for example, a strong smell, then the smelling consciousness or the nose consciousness will be arising. That means there's a consciousness sensing the smell. So this consciousness is known as nose consciousness or smelling consciousness. This smelling consciousness, it never appeared before. It's not the previous consciousness that heard the sound or the noise. But this consciousness is another consciousness. In other words, this smelling consciousness is another new consciousness. It's because there are conditions. There's a smell, then there's a nose sensitivity, so this consciousness can arise. So this consciousness is giving a name in accordance with the condition. So it's named as nose consciousness or smelling consciousness. So when mindfulness meditators follow the guideline, the principle of mindfulness meditation correctly, and the technique as well, then they could understand the teachings or the Dharma well. They could understand the characteristic of existence rightly. So impermanence is not can be seen easily unless one has developed sharp mindfulness, deep concentration, and has gained clearer and clearer or deeper and deeper experience into the three characteristics of conditioned phenomena. So only one could realize impermanence in that way, moment to moment impermanence. Then one could realize sankhara dukkha. It's because the scriptures define what is impermanent is dukkha. If one could not see impermanence clearly, one may not able to see dukkha. If one could not see impermanence and dukkha, one also could not realize anatta. As a mindfulness meditators have to realize sankhara dukkha during the practice through direct experience or personal experience. So when the truth of suffering is fully understood, then one would abandon the cause of suffering. Also, when the cause of suffering is abandoned, then one would attain a cessation of suffering. This evening, I had explained about the first noble truth. So if mindfulness meditators aspire to fully understand the truth of suffering, then they have to be mindful of five aggregates, in other words, their own mind and body processes as they really are. So that's why this meditation is known as Satu Satya Kamathana. In other words, by being mindful of your own mind bodily processes or minds or mental states and bodily phenomena, it could lead you to attain path knowledge. That path knowledge enable you to uproot your mental deformance and realize the Four Noble Truths. So, if your way of meditation can lead you to realize the Four Noble Truths, that practice is a noble practice. So I wish all meditators will be heedful to the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path by the practice of Satipatthana meditation, so that you could fully understood the truth of suffering, and then abandon the cause of suffering, and eventually attain cessation of suffering by your own effort, through your personal experience or direct experience that you could gain in these mindfulness meditations.